Welcome to the Today's Leader podcast. Building tomorrow's best leaders, today.
Way to go, guys. Way to go. Keep it going. Good job, guys. All right, Paul, I see you. All right, John, let's finish. Coach Cole.
Great job, guys.
Hey there, it's Coach Curl here, and welcome to episode 434 of the Today's Leader podcast, Building Tomorrow's Best Leaders Today. Now, the similarities between high-performance sports and business leaders can be incredibly obvious at times. High-performance business and sporting teams are built on a foundation of some key critical principles. And today's guest is going to share some of that knowledge that we take out of the high-performance sporting world and bring into business leadership. Now, it's not every day that we get a chance to speak with someone who's coached in that pressure cooker world that is the NFL, the National Football League in America. So today we are in for a real treat. Evan Burk is a speaker. He's a former NFL coach. He's now also a podcast host who uses the sports world as a backdrop to engage audiences with thought-provoking lessons of leadership, team building, and creating a championship culture. A championship culture. Now, Evan Burk is not your typical football coach. Despite not playing football beyond high school and no network in the coaching profession, Evan's unlikely football journey began as a fourth grade coach. A fourth grade coach where he quickly worked his way to the NFL in just 6 years. It's an unbelievable story. Working his way into NFL coaching from fourth grade coaching into the NFL in just 6 years. And included coaching stints with teams such as the Miami Dolphins, the UCLA, and SMU. Now, after spending 15 plus years working with the highest performance athletes, coaches, and teams on the planet, Coach Burk uses his unique football coaching background to teach people now how to utilize the same strategies in business and life that elite players and high-performing teams use. This is an absolute treat. So after a word from our sponsor, please welcome Evan Burk to the Today's Leader podcast.
The podcast is brought to you by Think and Grow Business, the home of the Think and Grow Business Mastermind. If you're serious about growing your business, get serious and join a mastermind group today. Find out more at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au.
And it's my pleasure to welcome to the Today's Leader podcast, Building Tomorrow's Best Leaders Today. Please welcome the author of Finding Intangibles, Evan Burk. How are you today, Evan?
Coach, I'm doing great today, and thank you for having me on. I'm excited to talk to you.
Now, you've got this multifaceted stuff sort of happening. You're a podcast host, you're an author, you're a former high-level NFL football coach. So I've got so many things that are going on in my mind that I'm probably going to stumble over a couple of questions as we go through. But first up, let's just share your story. Tell us the Evan Burk story.
Yeah, well, first of all, I appreciate you having me on and giving me the opportunity to share my story. I grew up in Dallas, Texas, here in the United States, and always was fascinated with sports and always drawn to sports. Can't say I was the most talented individual or a playmaker at all levels, but always was drawn and involved in sports. Played high school football, high school wrestling. And then when I went to college, I was not big. I was not recruited to play football. So I went to the University of Colorado and was just there as a student. And after my first year, really just kind of had a little bit of a desire to be a part of a team again, be around competition. And that kind of led me to exploring, well, what am I looking for? Am I going to go be a part of the football team? I didn't even know that was possible. So I did the next best thing. If you want to be the head coach for the Dallas Cowboys, is I went and found a team to coach. So I started coaching fourth grade football while I was still a student at the University of Colorado. And that progressed to me coaching at a local high school, which then led to me beginning my career as a college and NFL coach after I graduated from university, and spent 12 years coaching at every level, and very fortunate in terms of the people I worked with and the teams that I was a part of, and coached with the Miami Dolphins, UCLA, SMU. But in 2016, I kind of had a moment where I was really feeling like there was more. More to life, more to what I wanted to do with my experiences and my coaching and the effect that I wanted to have. So I transitioned and started doing executive coaching, speaking, and as you mentioned, the podcast and the book that I recently wrote on my experiences as a coach, and really just kind of use a lot of the same high performance strategies, practices, methods in my own speaking and coaching now. So I'm trying to do my best to kind of utilize my previous experience and give people an interesting and hopefully relatable way to take in the trainings and speakings that I do.
I can just imagine. But I'm a bit intrigued that you can make it into the coaching environment of an NFL team and then make the choice to leave, because for a lot of people that would have been like the pinnacle of what they were aiming for. What was some of the decision-making process that you followed there? I know that you were obviously going through what else is there, and there must be more, but that would have been a really tough decision to make.
Yeah, it was. And I, as you progress, and I'm sure this is true for any career, you have different experiences, you have different places and people that you work with, and that adds to your enjoyment or maybe the fulfillment that you get out of a certain profession or job. And as such as college coaching and professional coaching, you really have very little say over where you are going to coach and what's going to happen in a given season. Yes, you're coaching the team and you're coaching the players, but a lot of things are out of your control. And so I coached at a lot of different levels. My NFL experience was kind of in the middle of my coaching career in 2010. And then after that, had made my way to UCLA. And, all of these different experiences, as I was going through them, I was very focused. I knew that I wanted to be a high-level college or NFL coach. As I like to call it, that was my North Star that drove me, and it drove all the decisions I made in my life. And I think that it didn't happen over a long period of time where I started to question things. It really happened very suddenly at the end of my last season, my 12th season in 2015. And that was really the first time where I kind of had like a moment where I felt, do I really want to keep doing this? And for the audience, just so they know, in a coach's lifestyle, and it's really a lifestyle more than it is a profession, you might move every 2 to 3 years. And as I mentioned, you have very little say over where you go and who you work with. And it's a lot of times just musical chairs trying to find a job before it fills up. And I just look down the road 30 years and it never ends. You're always in this grind. And, in typical professions, you are the sum of your experiences. And if you are at a certain level and you rise through the ranks and have different jobs, like that carries you to the next job. It's not always like that in coaching. You can easily go from an NFL coach to a lower level college coach, back up to a high level college coach, and it just never ends, this rat race, this grind, so to speak. And I kind of started to question whether that was what I really wanted over the next 30 years of my life, and questioning what else I would do. And so that was a little long-winded, but that was kind of how it eventually came up and how I eventually made the decision that, yes, I do think that there's more that I want to do outside of coaching, and made the ultimate decision to leave.
Yeah, I can imagine the grind and the stress, especially as they're coming towards the end of a season and the contract's due, or the head coach is under pressure, or and I've seen the ESPN documentary, so I can sort of understand exactly what you're talking through there. So, just that continual angst, the ability to pack up and move on a moment's notice and change cities, teams, loyalties, I guess, in so many ways, it would have been incredibly challenging. So, let's talk about the makeup of a championship team. So we talk about talent in football teams, any sort of sporting team, you need to have some talent. But there's also, and I'm guessing as we talk a little bit about your book later on, there's more to it than just talent. So, what is some of the makeup or the character traits that you see in those championship teams that deliver high performance consistently?
Yeah, I think as I started to really look at it and look at teams I was on, teams I competed against, teams I was studying as a young coach, it wasn't always the most talented teams that won. As a matter of fact, I would make the argument it never is the most talented team that wins. It was always the team that had the most character. And I think that was probably the beginning of me thinking about these other things, these other traits that helped define a championship team or helped make up a championship team, and eventually led me to writing this book and obviously doing a lot of research around this topic. Here in the United States, American football, there's a couple of teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers and the New England Patriots that have had long, sustained runs of success. And they haven't always been the most talented teams. Certainly they have talented players, and that's part of it. And I talk about that in my book, that talent is essential, but success is not determined by talent.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I wanted to kind of write a book that hopefully would challenge the audience to take a fresh approach to what it takes to build a high-performance team and a team that can win consistently. And essentially, it is all of these other things. It is the combination of not only the players involved on a team, but the people as well. Things like work ethic, growth mindset, being a team player, creating chemistry, getting everybody pulling in the same direction. It's hard to measure these things, and you could make the argument you can't measure these things. But anybody that's experienced it knows that it's there, and we'll talk about it. And as I like to say, and I'm paraphrasing from an American football coach, Chris Peterson, sports is all about random events and setbacks. And so what you're looking for is obviously people that have the talent to be competitive at the level that you're competing at, but you also want the people that are going to be able to adapt and overcome those random events and setbacks. And I think that's at the heart of this book. And again, the reason that I wrote the book.
There's a lot of synergies, I guess, in what you were just talking about and what we see in executive teams in the corporate world. Often it's not the most talented executive that goes to the top. It's the one that can build a team, create alignment, and deliver and be really accountable towards performance. Is that what you saw, and is that why then you made this shift into the executive and corporate space?
Yes, and I'll be honest with you, Tony, I don't know if I 100% knew that leaving coaching. That was all I knew. As I mentioned before, I started at 19 as a fourth grade football coach. I didn't know what the real world was like. I didn't know what it was like in business worlds. But I think as I started to transition out of coaching and started to meet more people and get involved in this space, I really saw that there were a lot of similarities to performing at a high level in sports that translated specifically to performance-driven teams, right? Like sales is a great example. Getting told no a bunch of times, but yet still having that resilience to pick up the phone again and show up at the next business. I mean, there's a lot of traits that translate, I think, into business, but also our lives as well. Nobody's life is perfect. And I think a lot of times the people that you see have success have this ability to keep going regardless of the success or failures that they have behind them. So, to answer your question, I do think that there are a lot of similarities. And obviously there's different strategy, the football strategies don't relate, but there are a ton of strategies in terms of creating a team. What is your talent acquisition process? How do you incorporate character into that talent acquisition process? Looking for these things that we've been talking about, the growth mindset, the being a team player, the resiliency. I think all of these are present in the high-level teams that I work with, and as you said, into executive teams as well.
There's an old mantra that we sort of have here in Australia with some of our senior level rugby league coaches that we have here, and it's all about hiring for character first, so that they're really building that that culture of success and resilience and strength and alignment and team. And those teams, funnily enough, that really have that mantra are the ones that are consistently successful, like the Patriots in the United States. Although some would just say it was Tom Brady, but we know that there's a culture in behind that team. And fancy him coming back again to go around. What is he, 45 now? That's unbelievable.
Don't do him like that, Coach. He's 44.
44, so
yeah.
I still cannot believe he's coming back for another year. But if it's not finished, it's not finished. Hey, when you talk through your coaching career, you went from dabbling in it, I guess, at the beginning, even though that dabbling obviously had some intent and some purpose, and you went from like coaching like high school teams to the NFL in what I would consider would be quite a short span of time. I think in your bio it says like 6 years. How did that happen? Because to me, I'm sort of thinking, my God, how good is that to be able to go from that level of coaching to the highest level in such a short space of time? What were some of the key things that happened that enabled that to materialize?
Yeah, I think one of the things I'll point out is that my path is very unique in terms that I do not have a typical path to being a football coach. Most football coaches, and I apologize, I don't know if this is 100% true in other sports, but most coaches in American football are either former college or professional players, or they have typically a dad or a family member that is an NFL executive or a college coach, we'll just say, for the highest levels. I didn't have any of that. I had just played high school football. I wasn't a stud player in high school. I had no affiliation to the college team that I was attending. And so, as you said, going from fourth grade football to the NFL in 6 years, I think that I was always very intentional. And I know you used that word a moment ago, and I was always learning. I was always having an eye for the next step, even when I was in fourth grade football, coaching freshman football in high school. And I think that it's an important thing to just note, and I talk a lot about this in my own coaching and speaking. Small wins always end up being the path to achieving big goals.
Yeah.
So to say that I, at 19 years old, was like, I'm going to be in the NFL in 6 years, absolutely was not the way I was operating. Quite honestly, I had no idea what I was doing, right? Like, I was just trying to get some experience so that when I went to the high school the next year, I had something that I had done. And I think that all those experiences start to kind of compound on each other, and you have one experience and you are learning in that experience, but you're also networking, as I mentioned, having an eye towards what's next. And I was very lucky. I went from fourth grade football to coaching high school football straight into college. And my first college job was at SMU in Dallas, Texas, where I'm from. And I was a volunteer ops assistant. So I was passing out Chick-fil-A's. I was making sure that guys were going to class. I was monitoring study hall. All of the glamorous things that you imagine when you have this dream of being a football coach. And again, I wasn't making any money, but I was very passionate about passing those Chick-fil-A's out. I was like, I had the mentality that like I'm dominating and I'm building the foundation for the greatness that I'm going to claim down the road. And the only reason I mention that is because I really did have this mentality that I can't do anything about like what's next, but I can be assured that I'm going to make sure everybody here knows how much I care and that I'm going to be performing to my highest level in this role, even though it's not the role I desire, the role I ultimately want. That was the way I approached everything. And I was fortunate to be promoted or have a different role every single year. So I wasn't the ops assistant again. Then I started working with video, and then I started working with offense and defense. And so at the end of my time at SMU, I had touched every facet of the program, and I started putting my eye towards the NFL. And I didn't know anybody. All I knew were the college coaches that I had worked with. So what I had done is I made a spreadsheet of all the coaches I had worked with and listed out where they coached from 1970 to 2009. And the reason why I did this is because I was mentioning earlier, typical football coaches, they played under coaches that are now in the coaching profession, and they can just reach out to those people and get a job if they're in good standing with those individuals. If you have a dad that is a coach, which a lot of coaches now have, like that father's network basically is passed down to that son, right? Or maybe the dad is reaching out on behalf of the son to get them a job. I didn't have this, so I had to figure out who I knew in my network that worked in the NFL. So after I did this timeline of all the coaches I knew, which was maybe 20, 25 coaches, I then made a timeline of every employee in the NFL that I could find. So every coach, every general manager, everybody in player personnel, anybody I could find that was employed by an NFL team, I did that exact same thing, 1970 to 2009. And anywhere I saw an overlap, I wrote a handwritten letter to that NFL employee.
Wow.
Hi, I'm Evan Burk. I'm a coach here at SMU. I know you coached with Coach Curl back at Syracuse, and he says great things about you. I'm going to be at the Senior Bowl in February, and I'd love to meet you and get your advice on getting a job in the NFL. And I ended up writing 450 handwritten letters to everywhere that I had a connection, and was not an overwhelming response to my handwritten letters. I think I got 12 responses that were actually personalized to me, acknowledging my letter. But out of those 12 responses, I got 3 interviews, and one of those interviews ended up being my opportunity in the NFL. So again, I'm telling a long-winded story, but that was kind of my thinking and attitude early on, and then kind of my mentality going into that off season after the 2009 season to really hustle and find anywhere that I could get in or any relationship I had that I could take advantage of and get a job in the NFL.
So you created your own network, and you were intentional with it, and it was purpose driven, and there was a result that you were going to get at the end of the day. And it's really, when we talk about sales, those 400 letters that you sent out is equated back to maybe 400 reach outs or 400 lead generators, which may create 3 sales, but the sales leader has to be of the mindset that those 3 sales are going to be an absolute positive. So that's a great story. So and the other thing that I just wanted to pick up on during that conversation is that there are so many links between what you've been through and the endeavors that you've shown in career leadership. If you may not have the world's best network or old school sort of ties or any of those things that can help people within business, but you created it, you worked diligently, you're enthusiastic, that whole concept of being the best person to hand out the Chick-fil-A's, I thought was just every role that we do, if we can do it to the highest possible level and have energy and enthusiasm, no matter what it is, people are going to notice that, and then people are going to want some of that. So there's so many lessons there for leaders, because sometimes we just, knowing from my experience and what I've done myself, is that every now and again you drop the ball, or you feel depressed, or things aren't happening the way that they should be. So instead of having that mindset, well, I've still got to keep going, I've still got to be the best that I can be, you sometimes start looking for those other opportunities for potentially, when you're in the mindset not to be. Yeah, so great story, fantastic. So tell us a little bit more about Finding Intangibles and why a leader would find that book beneficial for them.
Well, I think anybody that is involved in building a high performance team, this book is for them. The things that lead to success, I think, are oftentimes misjudged in sports, and I think in our society. I think we look at people that have had success, and I think we look at their talent, and we kind of are in awe of their talent, and we don't recognize the effort and the work that went in to creating that talent, or to enhancing those skills and abilities. And I think that for anybody, to translate it into the corporate world, you have a lot of people you're looking at for jobs. And we'll just take like a simple example of somebody who has, let's just say 6-7 years of experience, but you just don't really feel like they're that gung-ho about this job. They're not that excited, versus somebody who's just starting out, but who is thirsting for an opportunity to pass out those Chick-fil-A's or whatever the case may be. Who are you going to hire? Well, yes, as a leader, if you hire the more experienced person, they're going to be able to slide into a role, and you're probably not going to have to worry about them, and they won't fulfill the role. And if you're just trying to be good enough, that's fine. Like, you can do that. Talent can get you by to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I don't work with any teams or leaders that are just trying to get by. Like, it's just not a fit. Like, that's not what I'm about. Everything I'm about is performing at the highest level, to like aim to be a championship team. And so I would much rather have somebody that I know I have to develop them. But when I'm talking to them, I know that they are thirsting for that opportunity. And so I think we do the same thing in sports. We look at somebody and we say, well, they've been in the league for 5 years, and like they can fulfill this role. Versus the young person who has all of these traits, and let's just say the ability to develop, the mindset to push through failures, the resiliency, all of these things. Like, that person has more of a potential to develop beyond what the person who has the certain number of years experience. Yeah. And I think I started to see this throughout my coaching career. And I just felt, I didn't know, Tony, like I was a young coach. I had started at 4th grade football. Nobody had taught me what goes into any of this. I just knew when I got to college and we started talking about young men, and all we talked about were, oh, yeah, he's good. Well, he's 6'1" and 3/8. So, and little things like that. Oh, his shoulders are too narrow. It's like, what are we talking about? Are we talking about things that actually dictate success? Because you brought up Tom Brady earlier. Tom Brady in 2000 is just a guy. And the reason why nobody is looking at him and every team in the league overlooked him is because they looked at him as just a guy. He didn't have the measurables. He looked clumsy. He's not athletic. But he had this other piece of his character where, as he puts it, they overlooked my competitiveness.
Yeah.
And they didn't understand. And if you go back and actually look at Tom Brady's story, Michigan had recruited the best high school athlete probably in the history of American sports.
Yeah.
Definitely at that time. His name was Drew Henson. He was the number one baseball player and number one football player in the nation. Wow. And everybody would have said, oh, yeah, let's play Drew Henson. But yet Tom Brady, even though he wasn't as skilled as Henson, he was able to overcome and eventually win the starting job. Well, if you just look at it, you would just say, well, he's not really that great at Michigan. I mean, he's good enough to be a backup, but you have to go back and look at the story of him having to fight off this ultra-talented player every day in practice in order to play that coming weekend at Michigan. Now, like in hindsight, yeah, that tells a huge part of his story. And I'm not saying that everybody that has this character trait is destined for greatness, right? A lot of times it's luck. It's the team you're on. But I just saw time and time again that if we look at the great teams and we look at the elite performers, it's never that they're the most talented.
Yeah.
They might develop their talent to a high level, but the reason they're able to develop their high talent or their high level of talent is because of these intangibles, these unseen character traits that aren't going to show up on film, and they're not going to show up on a stat sheet.
Yeah, and so true. It's so true. There's an old saying here, once again, I'm not sure who said it, but the world is full of talented alcoholics. The people sitting on a bar stool telling everyone how good they were at high school, or the couldas, the wouldas, the shouldas. And, you know, it is the people with discipline and those hidden intangibles that ultimately make the grade. So now, you didn't call your podcast Good Enough. You called it Higher Level. So tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Appreciate that. It's called The Highest Level, and it's really a exploration of the intersection of sports and leadership. And I'm typically interviewing athletes, coaches, sports leaders, anybody that's involved in the world of sports and has great insight into high performance and leadership and building teams. That's kind of the emphasis of a lot of our conversations. And it's really just a continuation of the conversations I loved having in my coaching career. If you can't tell, Tony, I get a little fired up when we start talking about team building and high performance. I don't know if that's coming through on the mic, but it's just something I was always passionate about, and it's something that I loved having those conversations, those 30-minute, hour-long conversations in a coaching room about, like, oh, you played with Tom Brady, you know, his first 5 years in the league. Like, what was that like? Like, I love those stories, and I try and replicate a little bit of that on the podcast. So again, it's called the Highest Level Podcast, and you know, typically examining the intersection of sports and leadership.
Excellent. Evan, it's been a fascinating conversation and really intrigued as to the journey that you've taken. So who's been the inspiration, or is there any one person that's inspired you in your journey?
I was very fortunate to in terms of my family. I came from an amazing, loving family, and people like my grandfather and my parents had a tremendous effect on me. But I'll highlight a coach that was probably the most impactful coach for me on my journey. His name was Frank Gann Sr. He was a longtime NFL special teams coach, coached in the NFL for 25, 30 years, and came out of retirement in 2008 to coach at the SMU Mustangs. And I maybe have coached with maybe 200, maybe 250 coaches in my career. And we could sit here and debate who number 10 through number 2 is, but there is absolutely no question who the best, most impactful coach I ever had the privilege of working with, and that was Frank Gann Sr. And a lot of what I teach, a lot of what I talk about goes back to him and the core values that he had in his coaching and that he helped develop on that SMU football team in 2008. And he was somebody that was incredibly encouraging to me, even though I was a young coach, even though I really didn't know much of anything. As I said, I was kind of in a place where I was learning a lot. He was incredibly encouraging to me and a very positive influence and an excellent role model in terms of the type of communicator and the type of leader that I strive to be.
Yeah. Great answer. And on the way to the highest level of performance, we're going to see a lot of failure along the way. So tell me a little bit about your relationship with failure.
Yeah, I'm very, very familiar with failure, as any person that performs or coaches in a high performance industry would be.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things, I read a book that really was an inspiration to me for writing Finding Intangibles. It was called Mindset by Carol Dweck, who's a professor at Stanford, and it talks a lot about growth mindset and the anywhere from raising children and building that growth mindset to also finding it in athletes and teaching it in the classroom. And it was incredibly inspirational to me because I felt like it directly tied into the things that you want, either in people that you are associated with or that you build your team with. You want people that have the ability to fail, and not only fail and get up and try again, but also fail and have the ability to look within yourself or look within that situation and understand why you were successful or why you weren't successful.
Yeah.
And I would say that's probably one of the biggest things is, again, I'm just talking about my ability, but I would say self-reflection is one of the things where I have no problem reflecting on some of those failures and understanding why I wasn't successful in certain environments, or maybe why I didn't reach the level that I wanted to in a certain situation or in certain environments. And so I think that's something that's really important, is just the ability to admit mistakes and the ability to continue to push to continue to aim higher.
Excellent. What's the vision for yourself, Evan? What does it look like in the future? What sort of an impact do you want to continue to have?
That's a good question. I think it's always evolving. And I think I'm somebody that I'm always energized by new environments. For a while in coaching, it's, going to a different job every year or two. But now I really enjoy kind of jumping in to different teams, being in different environments and sharing my message. And if you had asked me 6 months ago, I probably wouldn't have said that I was going to write a book. I probably would have been focused on something else. But at the moment, I really enjoy the podcast and bringing on the guests that I have there. So I'd love to continue to build that and see where it goes. As you mentioned earlier, my book, something I'm very passionate about, and sharing that with audiences. Obviously buying the book, which you can find on Amazon, but also speaking on the topics in the book. And I think continuing to grow my platform as a speaker. And those are kind of the things that I'm focused on. I don't know how you operate, Coach. I like to set visions for myself, but they're always evolving, I've found.
Yeah.
So, I try not to be too solid in where I'm headed. I like the adaptability to change if I'm finding success or fulfillment in a certain area.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. A wise man once told me that it's more about progression than anything else. So every day we want to be progressing. And yes, it's good to have a bit of an idea about what it looks like and what the future may want to hold, but you need to be getting one step closer every day to what that looks like. So every day it's about progression. And every now and again, we're going to come across an obstacle, and it's about how we map our way around that obstacle as opposed to trying to charge through it. So that's some wise words once again from yourself, Evan. So well done. Thank you so much for your time today. How can people connect with you?
They can find me on social media. My handle on any social media is at Coach Evan Burk. Burk is spelled B-U-R-K. Twitter is probably the easiest place to find me. And then also my website, www.coachevanburk.com.
Excellent.
And as I mentioned, you can find the book, Finding Intangibles, on Amazon. Sorry.
No worries. No, we'll make sure we've got all those links as well as the link to the podcast in the show notes. So once again, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today, Evan. Thank you so much for investing in today's leaders.
Appreciate it, Coach, and thank you again for having me. Really enjoyed it.
And now, It's time for Tony's 2 cents.
Now, one of the great stories that was shared by Evan was his story of the hundreds of handwritten letters, the notes that he wrote in creating his opportunity in the NFL. Now, he didn't have the network that was built from a successful playing career. He didn't have the family or the college networks. All he had was enthusiasm and energy in whatever roles that he had undertaken. That energy, that enthusiasm ultimately created the network, because it is what people remembered about their association with Evan. Now, the lesson to me is really clear for all leaders. It doesn't matter where you are now. It doesn't matter where you are now. But what does matter is that where you are now, you are doing the very best that you can do in whatever role that you're undertaking. Putting energy, having enthusiasm, maintaining that positive approach to build positive relationships is all critically important for every leader out there, no matter where it is that they are. It's not normal for someone to advance to NFL coaching from 4th grade high school coaching. It is just not normal. And to be able to do that just through the skills and the abilities and the attitudes and the energy and the enthusiasm that Evan showed in whatever role that he was tasked with is just a fantastic story for you to grab onto and make it your own. So what can you achieve seriously with the right attitude, the right approach, and by showing energy, proactivity, and enthusiasm wherever you are? Once again, thanks to Evan for investing in today's leaders. And as always, his links are in the show notes. If you're looking to build better leadership skills, check out the Today's Leader website at todaysleader.com.au. We really are driving a leadership revolution to build tomorrow's best leaders today. Today's Leader is a collective, the mindset to make a difference, the ability to create an impact. Think and Grow Business hosts our Today's Leader Mastermind. Think and Grow Business, where we focus on personal, professional, and business growth. Book your free 30-minute discovery call right from the homepage at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au. Don't forget, wherever you are standing stronger, braver, and wiser. Don't forget the golden rule. Don't be an arsehole. I'll see you all again next week. Bye for now.